Welcome everyone to another Learning Rebels Coffee Chat. And today we are talking about evaluating training impact. We appreciate everybody being here with us and having these conversations because this is how we all learn and grow from each other. This is going to be a very interesting conversation, I suspect. It helps me think about things in an entirely different way. Sometimes I come into these conversations thinking that the conversations are going to go in a certain direction and you all never fail to take it in a direction that I didn't expect, which is always fun. That's the fun thing about it. When we put together a training program, oftentimes we don't think about how are we going to measure that level 3 or level 4. And we don't think about it until we come to the conclusion of the program. Either we have concluded developing it or we have already implemented it. When we start thinking about how we're going to measure it at that point, it's almost too late, isn't it? My question to you is, how are you doing that? What is your process for considering what you're going to evaluate, how you're going to evaluate, what people you're going to get involved in the evaluation process? How is that all working for you?
My company is relatively new. I mean, we're not new, but we're kind of new in terms of setting up our own training department. And for us, it's about establishing a consistent intake process that includes what is the actual results that you're looking to achieve with this course, because most of our courses are coming from our internal clients making a training request. What is the behavior or metric that you're looking to improve? What is the baseline? What's your goal with it? And then what would be the ROI impact? And that helps us twofold. It helps establish what is the data, where is the data coming from, who is pulling it, or what system does it live in, what is the goal of this class, and it also helps us prioritize because we have limited resources. So is this a training project that is going to prioritize high and we need to get it done ASAP, prioritize low, or is it not even something that we want to take on? Because at the end of the day, the company has these larger objectives that we all need to work towards, and a lot of training requests come in that are nice to have, and those are the ones that are the hardest to measure.
Yes, and that sounds very familiar. How many of you have intake forms like that?
I just started. I told them, look, we need to have an intake form and we need to be asking our stakeholders and a manager, what does success look like? How will we know that this training program actually did anything? Now, I do a lot of compliance training, which is a really hard kind of thing. It's kind of hard to measure that people didn't do something. But when they do, like we've had 0 reports to the hotline. Maybe we need a speak up training and see, because really 1,000 people and 0 reports? Well, I don't know. It just doesn't sound right. Everybody's ethical. Nothing bad is happening. Compliance, I think, is difficult, but when we're doing real training, I want to know, were there 50% more applications? Were there 50% more complaints? How do we know that people are using this correctly? Do you want less calls to the IT help desk?
Yes. And so my question, Jessica, is who is making the decision as far as which projects get accepted, which do not?
We have a department that does project management for a lot of things, training included, and then we have performance consultants. So they manage the projects and they also liaise between training design, training delivery, any vendors or contractors we use, and our internal clients. And so that decision is made pretty collaboratively with a lot of discussion. The more data that we have, the easier it is to make those decisions, but it's done in partnership with the requesters. And so if you tell somebody this project prioritizes medium, you have to be able to demonstrate why. Having a form that says, who is the audience? How many people is this? What's the metric we're hoping to impact? And who are the champions, right? If Joe Schmo over in some, team is a champion versus, an executive level leader, sometimes that'll bubble something up. We want to have that solid ROI on those metrics, but the prioritization is a combination of things, and it can be done by really anybody who's making the decisions in the training org. I know different organizations are set up different ways, but it's not going to be your designers. It's more likely to be like your performance consultants or project managers that do that.
Heather, the need for speed with business changes can often trump a good intake form or needs analysis, which is true. You got to do what you got to do. And that may impact how you go about deciding which training programs rise up to the top of the priority list, but it shouldn't impact how we're going to ultimately evaluate its success, right? So when we think about measuring that success, how are we connecting lessons to learning to action from a business perspective?
For our leadership development program, that is our biggest program that we do a program evaluation on. It's taken many years to try to turn the perception of just needing to look at like the butts and seats, which is not really an accurate measurement of growth. There's been needing to advocate for that and get individuals to understand that this program is stable, it is mature. We have demonstrated sustainability for the last decade. We have a pre and post assessment measure set up. So with a pre and post assessment measure, we can identify the competency growth from the beginning to the end, especially when we aggregate it to the broad competency itself versus the itemized questions. And then we can even aggregate it across the entire program itself. So the program itself has actually shown both practical and statistical significance growth, which is quite cool. The only monetary funding that we get for this program that is actually easily trackable is our contracts for in-person deliveries. So what we've been able to do is utilizing the data that's in our LLMS to see how many training opportunities in average over this period of time does someone attend. And we use that number to go, okay, so if our contract is $1,000, let's say people are attending 2 trainings on average, and there are 10 people in the program. So dividing 1,000 by 20 equals how much it costs to send each person per training. That gets us our butts and seats contractual investment. And then what we have done is multiplied the average number by how many trainings that individuals on average attend. If they attend 2, we can say that with your investment of $100 per this program that they're in, this is the growth that your investment dollars have kind of helped make happen.
How are you connecting that to whether or not the leadership development program has had impact on the business?
So it's a behavioral post-assessment on frequency. So we can show that individuals have moved to maybe doing these behaviors once a week to doing them on average 3 or more times a week or daily. And yeah, behavioral response doesn't get deeper than that until we do our follow-up. It takes their supervisor's perception of their growth 6 months later, in addition to what sustained growth have you seen 6 months after you've exited the program. Some people have illustrated that they have had responsibility growth, that they have had a job change that has occurred from it because they were getting groomed while they were in the program. It took many years to getting to this place in which the program evaluation is at. However, in L&D, we know one of the first areas to get cut when there's budget constraints is L&D. So by trying to substantiate this program is trying to ensure that for the long term, it stays.
How do you handle the fact that the training may have impacted that number, but there's probably other things impacting that number? How do you handle that?
This falls within the needs analysis. So when you've got your analysis document that goes to the business sponsor, you say, this training is going to impact XYZ along with the change in leadership, the rollout of a new process, the installation of Salesforce.com. When you have 1 + 1 + 1, this equals 3. So while we're not claiming full credit for success, you can say, well, we said that this would happen if the Salesforce.com rollout occurred the way that it was supposed to. That didn't happen. So subsequently, we didn't see the success that we should have had. You put that all in your analysis or your instructional design document, right? Where you're analyzing all of the different risks that go along with the training program. And this is where you say certain things are contingent or they're prerequisites.
It's important to set the expectations of what we want. Sometimes people just want to do training because they think it's the answer. And so setting those expectations and really challenging them and saying, how do I know this is going to work, really gets the managers thinking. It's mostly managers and directors that come to me for training. In cases where I know it can be an impact, where I know that there will be data, I really push to get those reports, to get the data. What is it now? How then after the training, what is it? It is a challenge though, because some people think I should just create the training and not ask those questions.
This is where sometimes where we conflate the training needs analysis with the evaluating impact. The training needs analysis is determining whether or not we should be doing this training in the first place. The evaluating impact is the latter part of that. So if we do decide that this training is something we need to do on some scope or level, then how are we going to evaluate whether or not it actually had success within the organization? Compliance, right? We all have safety classes. Okay, so now what's the business impact?
I do the emergency response training for a large utility company. We've got 400 upper management employees or management employees who need to be able to implement our emergency response plan. We work backwards. When they walk out of there, what do they need to know when they walk out of here? What are the most important things they need? We started out doing pre-post test, found out that didn't work because our training department, for lack of a better way of saying, was probably a little too lazy to do the real true follow through to get the comparison between the pre and post. So they weren't following up and doing what should be done. So what we did is we went to a pre-introduction. This year, we actually have our president of our company giving an introduction to the group to tell them how important this is to the company and to them and to our customers. And then what we do is we have the training and we have a post assessment, but then we also do a survey, a 2-part survey. The first 8 questions of a 12-question survey are, the old, 1 through 5, satisfactory, excellent type of thing. And then the last 4 questions we use are open-ended questions where they have to actually fill in what it is that they either gained from, what can we do to improve and all that. We really do look at working that thing backwards.
This is the way any training program should be handled, reverse engineering it and beginning with the end in mind. So when you've got those two things together, the propensity for success increases. And that's what we're looking for. You see greater growth, right, in people. You see them moving up within the organization. You see retention numbers, are lower than they might have been in the past, right? And so those are all business metrics that we can attribute to any training program that we put out. It's just a matter of planning it at the very beginning.
We also similarly have level 3 behavior change types of assessments. Sometimes we'll submit things that we do for a variety of award applications. And I noticed that in those rubrics for those outside awards, they keep emphasizing that L3 needs to be third-party validated. What are some things that you all are doing that is third-party validated? Because the only thing I can think of is manager observation.
We do say that it needs to be third party observed. And a lot of times I even kind of am on the cusp of whether or not management observation is valid. You have the halo effect happening here. Regardless of who you are or where you are, we still have biases. There are people that we inherently like more than somebody else, or we appreciate somebody's work more than another. When we do that manager type of observation, we may put a halo over someone versus not so big of a halo over somebody else. And then that management observation becomes skewed. How do we handle that?
I've been speaking with some contractors who've been talking to me about immersive simulations and how to measure behavioral changes for that person. So it's not about what they say they do, it's about what they do when put in that situation. And if you can find a way to score those, you can put them through that simulation before the program and after the program to see if there's an actual behavioral shift. I think we all think we're pretty smart people and make great decisions. And if I look through a multiple choice test, or if I'm taking a survey, well, I can see what the desirable decision is going to be. So I'm going to select, oh yeah, I do that. I do that all the time. But if you put me in the situation, I have lots of good options to choose from, but you're measuring a specific skill, I might answer it differently. Has anybody tried that before? Do you have any feedback on how well it went?
A colleague of mine, they use the digital coaching. The person videotapes themselves doing what was required of them or asked of them, or the steps, showing that they know how. They have it videotaped. And then the manager reviews those videos and gives coaching tips and things like that. So that is one way that I've seen where they virtually can handle the coaching, kind of checking to see if it was actually done. And they enter information and give them additional coaching tips or things like that. The technology is available and out there to do that. I just don't know how many organizations are really doing that. I actually love that idea.
There are a number of applications that can do that, especially with sales people, where they can upload their elevator pitch, upload a video of them describing features and benefits of a product. Artificial intelligence can score it if that's the way that you want it set up, or you can have a unbiased third party like somebody from the L&D department, or peer-to-peer type of evaluations as well, where people can listen and give their comments and give their feedback. Level 3 is all about whether or not they are using the skills taught in the training, versus level 4, which is whether or not we're having real business impact. We think about who is actually measuring that level 3. Is it independent work observation? When you go to the airport, you might see somebody walking around and watching somebody with a checklist, and that's because they're putting them through a rubric. Rubrics are one way of being able to help managers assess whether or not their people are being more productive or using the skills used on training, and taking away some of the bias that might be there if you show them how to use that rubric. Is anyone using tools like that?
It was actually Gordon Food Service that was using this system. They may be regional to the Midwest, I'm not sure, because it was a sales team that was on training and things like that. And so they also had customer feedback that played into that, which to me would be a third party, similar to rubric. Now, they may not have used a rubric.
Well, I'm sure a customer isn't using a rubric unless it's like a
survey or something.
Right, exactly. Like a secret shopper or something along those lines, right?
If anyone has like some examples of the training objectives for those chapters or those courses with regards to that in mind, looking ahead for the outcomes, but using the objectives to, expect this type of measurement. I'm just curious what those would look like. The level 3, when you're writing your training objectives, that's within the objectives. Is that correct? What we want to measure.
Right. And you would have that sort of actionable outcome attached to any of these objectives, right?
We have a program, a leadership program, and we, at the end of that, have a half-day simulation where they have to pull the skills that they've used throughout the 6 months, and based off of a rubric that we allow assessors to use to assess our participants that are going through the simulation. And then at the end, we send those rubrics out to them. That is somewhat how we use a third party. We use assessors that are not necessarily facilitators of the program. They just have really good leadership skills. And so that they are able to actually watch and listen to our participants have a difficult conversation, and they assess them off of what skills they are bringing from the program into that conversation.
When you say third party, are you talking about contractors or people who are not the learner's supervisor or in the training org? They're just somebody else within the company?
Third party, someone else within the organization. So it's not a peer-to-peer. So it's not someone that's in their cohort. It could be someone from a past cohort. We pull people from the organization that we know that have had success in difficult conversations. And sometimes it's even some of the facilitators throughout the program because they are aware of what skills that we have taught, but most times it is someone that these people may not even know. I was listening to the biases around management or that peer-to-peer, and we took it away from that peer-to-peer because we felt like, you have those peers that are like, well, they almost did a good job, so I'm going to give them this score. And then we have a rubric based off of performance management or coaching or difficult conversations, and each assessor has a copy of that rubric.
And to tie that into JD's question, all of that would have been put into the learning objectives that the instructional designer would have used in order to create the course or program, but also in the overall goals that are sent to the participants. And the way that I like to think about this is if we let the participants know from a human perspective what the overall outcomes are going to be. For example, you're going to participate in this sales negotiation program in order to learn top converting elevator pitches. So that way you will make higher commissions and that the organization will improve its top line revenue. When you have those elements in there, you will improve your commission and the organization will see top line revenue. Then you've got really distinct outcomes that impact the business and also impact the person. That is what people generally want to know. Now, from an instructional design perspective, when we think about the longer, more formal learning objectives, that's where that sits. So by the end of this class, the participant will walk away with 5 different elevator pitches to be able to connect with their customers to handle any objections they may have about the product, right? Those are the sorts of objectives that might be hidden, but those are our guidelines. What other sorts of matrix are you looking for or that you use to support the training programs that you currently have?
We have a lot of these training programs that don't have the evaluation built into them. I went to a training magazine webinar. They talked about predictive questions. And so I've been trying to implement those into our surveys. The one that seems like the most universally applicable is a learning game score. So you ask, what did you know before the training? And now that you've had the training, what do you know after the training? And you get kind of a difference and see if they've learned anything or feel like they learned anything. That's been useful to give numbers to our training. I don't know how solid the information is, but it is a number, which is not something we've had in the past.
Right. It's baby steps. That type of pre and post assessment, which several of you have already mentioned, more falls towards the line of level 2 evaluation, which is learning. What did they learn? Even that, like you said, it's better than just depending on level 1s, which are the smile sheets. It's one step closer, which is great. And that's where we all need to be. We need to be taking those one step closer to being able to really getting and assessing if this is adding impact or adding value to the business.
Right now, every keystroke in Salesforce is being recorded. We have a new knowledge management program where they can see how many people have opened the documents, how many people have clicked links. This is where L&D professionals really need to start going and saying, where is the data? Are they inputting the data correctly into Salesforce? How many problems there are? What is the average time that it takes people to input an order before the course? And then we teach them how to do it. Then what's the average time after? Is there a difference? Is their rate of input decreasing? Those are the questions that I'm asking. Then the resource issues come in. But I think by me even raising the issue, I'm starting to get people to think about it.
Well, and I think that's important because you can show causation there, or at least correlation. Our most successful salespeople do this. They access the documents. They go through this process, they use that process, right?
Are the people that are the most successful salespeople using the one-pagers that are supplied by marketing? That's a really great question. I don't think we've ever asked that.
How we are asking questions matter. What questions do we need the answers to? How are we going to find the answers to those questions? What data sets are we using? And a lot of times people will say that level 4 evaluations, that's hard to do. My pushback on that is that it's not hard, it's time consuming. Sometimes the data isn't available when you want it to be available. You have to wait for it. Safety data, for example, that might only be available once a quarter. It's not necessarily hard, especially if you plan it up front. Exactly, Heather. You want better data, ask better questions. There's all sorts of resources out there. You got Will Thalheimer, who has his own sort of evaluation matrix and the way to go about creating quote unquote level 4. He calls it something different. That's why I say quote. In his book. We can't say a training program has been successful if we haven't thought up front about what success is going to look like, because then the program may have been designed incorrectly. What is it that you guys like to do? What sort of tips would you give each other for trying to ensure that your programs are indeed reaching the audience or reaching the outcomes you're hoping for them to reach? One thing that I used to like to do when I was back in corporate America, I used to keep a steering committee going. And that steering committee used to have managers, end users, business leaders in it to sort of sense check what we were doing. Tiger teams. JD, what tiger teams? What are tiger teams?
That's kind of what they call it here. So we'll get a group of influencing individuals together and just talk about what objectives do we want? What do we want to look at? Where is this training going and why are we doing it? That needs analysis with people who can understand where we want to go with it and then tie it back to some type of organizational directives, mission, vision, values, that type of thing, or even performance competencies. It helps me because I just started here, so I'm still trying to get my arms around the culture and the organization and things like that, my boundaries, where I can go, what I can say, where I can, say it and things like that. So they help a lot.
I think if we just have a conversation, because you don't know what's going to pop up in the middle of a conversation where you're like, ooh, I didn't know that was an issue. Oh, okay. I've learned something new today.
For post-course survey, because we use SurveyMonkey, I create the QR code and I put the QR code at the very end of the course. So on the last page, our company is very data focused. So I kind of tie into the culture that we're an evidence-based company and we need evidence on our training. You can be part of our evidence. If you like the training, let us know. If you don't like the training, let us know. This is your chance to be part of our evidence-based culture. I definitely increased the amount of people giving feedback on a mandatory information security course. Everybody has a mobile phone and people seem to really like taking surveys on mobile phones. Like they just love it. Now I'm building that into all custom courses. Even though this was a mandatory compliance course, we still want to hear what you have to say about it because I don't want to put bad learning out there.
I think the words matter. And the fact that you said that we are an evidence-based company and the information you're providing me with is evidence-based data, I think that says something. So the way that you phrased that, I think it's very important. The way that you phrased it to the public, I think that was spot on. JD put here, do your surveys allow for anonymous responses?
I have actually trained most of the people in our department and in other departments how to ensure that SurveyMonkey is actually anonymous. I really believe in anonymous surveys.
Pointing that out to survey takers is critical. It's also critical that we identify the difference between confidential and anonymous so they know exactly how that data is going to be used. Great conversation here. Thank you everyone for sharing all of your ideas and your tips and what you're doing for surveys and what you're doing for evaluations. Very helpful, I'm sure, to everybody who is on the call. So thank you, everybody. I hope everyone has a great weekend.